It's live for sure. It's high time we wake and not sleep, brother. High time. All right, we get ready to get started. Just want to make sure I shared it on all social media platforms through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. We live. So I want to give all praises, honor, and glory first and foremost to our Abanawa, to Abanawa, to our Father Yahweh, the Most High. We do so in the name by Hashem, Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai, in the name of the Anointed, who the world calls Christ, real name Yahweh Shai. Brother Chief Priest Alazar, he brother SICARRI. I announced, like I said, I went into yesterday, via YASHARAHLA, a lecture series that we're doing in regards to the indigenous peoples of the Americas and how they are the descendants, in fact, of the Hebrew Israelites of antiquity in the Bible through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. Again, it's called Viva YASHARAHLA. Yesterday we did Ephraim is a cake not turned. This one I kind of struggled with the name, what I was going to name it. So I went with the most obvious name that clearly, instead of being clever, because I wanted to be kind of clever, but it's not necessarily about being clever. It's more so about making sure that people get this information is visible. So I went with the most overt and the best explanation for it, with what's going to be talked about in the subject matter today, which is called Latinos and Natives were enslaved, lynched, and segregated too. Again, Latinos and Natives were enslaved, lynched, and segregated too. Right? And this is just because Latinos are usually identified more as Latino than Native, even though they're in fact Native, right? But they're natives that speak Spanish versus the American Indian Native that, speaks their various dialects as well as English. So again, Latinos and Natives were enslaved, lynched, and segregated too. A lot of this information has been somewhat, it's not actually all that hard to find, but it's just still not all that common. Certain things have not been suppressed throughout history, yet people just don't care about them or talk about them for whatever reason. So people don't know that these people went on slave ships, served on plantations, were lynched, and were segregated the same way the African American Negro was, right? So when you deal in engaging in Hebrew Israelites amongst our communities, and people go, well, the Negroes, the so-called black men, were the Israelites because of X, Y, and Z, you have to deduce that these people are also Israelites because all the same things happen to them, because the Spirit is bearing witness with our spirit who the children of God are. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, according to the Bible, history, archaeology, and prophecy, all through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. And we're going to talk about that in this morning's lecture. Right? So let's get this thing popping, man. Next slide. Now it says, this is Jeremiah 50 and 33. And it reads, thus saith Yahweh of hosts, or the Lord of hosts, children of Israel, the children of Israel rather, and the children of Judah were oppressed together. And all that took them captive held them fast, they refused to let them go. So here we see Judah and Israel oppressed together. That's dealing with the southern kingdom, the so-called African American, what's in Haitian, and the northern kingdom, your Latinos and natives, being collectively oppressed in the modern day prophetic daughter or spiritual Babylon. That's what this is a prophecy of, right? We're going to elaborate further. Next slide. Back up a little bit. So now, I'm going to read a source from here, from a source called, a book called Indian Slavery in Colonial America. And it reads, the English copied the Spanish and Portuguese. They saw the enslavement of Africans and Native Americans, not just black people, in the indigenous peoples of the Americas. They saw the enslavement of Africans and Native Americans as a moral, legal, and socially acceptable institution. A rationale for enslavement was just war, taking captives and using slavery as an alternative to a death sentence. The escape of Native American slaves was frequent because they had a better understanding of the land, whereas the African slaves did not. Consequently, the natives who were captured and sold into slavery were often sent to the West Indies or far away from their home. So it's letting you know that blacks and Native Americans were being enslaved right together, right? But sometimes Native Americans were able to escape because they had a prowess and understanding of the land because they're native to it, right? So oftentimes they would ship them out to, you know, kind of go around the fact that they know the land of the continent of the United States. So they would ship them out far away or to the islands, etc. Right? Next slide. Right? So as Deuteronomy 28:68, we all know what it says, and Yahweh and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. See, look, they sold us into America. The black man, the transatlantic slave trade, you're right. And guess what? Guess what was sold into Egypt on a ship? The Native American man. The same way the black man was sold into Egypt on a ship, the same way the Native American man was sold into Egypt on a ship. We had the historical documents. And I got more for you. I just broke you off with the first one. Right? By the way, wherever I spake unto thee, thou shalt say it, see it no more again, and there you shall be sold to your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. No redemption is came. The same way it didn't come to us, the same way it didn't come to them. Next slide. Deuteronomy 28:32. Now watch this. It says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thy eyes shall look and fail all the day with longing. Salakia. That's not the one I wanted. Salakia. Hold on. Open Deuteronomy 28. We gotta open Deuteronomy 28. I think I got the wrong scripture right there. My fault.
Which one I'm
I want to say it might be 33. What's 33 say? I copied this wrong, man.
The fruit of thy land.
There you go. Read that.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 33.
Uh-huh.
It says, the fruit of thy land.
The fruit of thy land, read on.
And all thy labors.
Uh-huh.
Shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up.
Yeah, so that's what happened. These people are indigenous to these Americas, yet a people that they didn't know came and ate the fruit of their land up. Who fits that prophecy? Huh? Next slide.
There's more. It says, and thou shalt be only oppressed.
And thou shalt what?
Be only oppressed.
They shall be only oppressed.
And crushed always.
Always, man. You go to a Native American reservation, you're going to see oppression and crushed. You think your project building is bad. You think your hood is bad. Wait till you go to that reservation, man. You see them houses that they living in. If you can call them houses. You see how destroyed they are. You see the alcoholism. Right? They're oppressed and crushed always. Read on. All right, next slide. Back up a little bit. And read this. Now it says, long before. All right, I want y'all to pay attention to this phraseology. Long before the transatlantic slave trade was established, or Salakia, long before the transatlantic African slave trade was established, all right? That's dealing with black people, right? Negro, West Indian, Haitian. Long before the transatlantic slave trade was established in North America, a transatlantic slave trade in Indians had been occurring since the very earliest European arrivals. So before a black man ever got put on a boat and sent to America, Native Americans were already getting put on boats and being sent to Europe, going into slavery on ships. Huh? Oh, but they don't fit the curses. Y'all stupid, man. Right? It was used as a weapon of war among the European colonists. It contributed, to the fierce decline in Indian populations after the coming of the Europeans, along with devastating disease epidemics, and lasted well into the 18th century when it was replaced by African slavery. It has left a legacy still felt among native populations in the East, and is also among the most hidden narratives in American historical literature. So people don't know this, and people have denied this. People not familiar with this, but guess what? It happened. Before Negro was imported here, Native Americans were exported from here. All right? Via Native American History.about.com. Next slide. Right. Deuteronomy 28:62. Remember it said they decimated their populations with slavery, with disease? Well, Deuteronomy says this, and ye shall be left few in number, whereas the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou shouldest not obey the voice of Yahweh thy God. So this is another one of the curses that they clearly fit. They were left few in number as a result of the Most High sending the white man as a curse and form of disciplinary action to them. 77 million Native Americans slaughtered by the white man over them centuries. Now they 0.8% of the population. That sounds like this curse in real time if I've ever heard it. Next slide. As we can see here, yeah, they can see it pretty cool. This is a painting of Native Americans being taken into slavery by the white man. Okay? Next slide. Another one. Native being taken into slavery by the white man. Next slide. Right? It is well known by historians that the slave trade began with Spanish incursions into the Caribbean and Christopher Columbus's taking of slaves, as documented in his own journals, right? Every European, now listen to this, this is important. Every European nation that colonized North America utilized Indians, slaves. I repeat, every European nation that colonized North America used Indian slaves. Every one of them. Right? Some of these slides is going to be blurry. The more words is in it, it's going to be blurry. There's nothing you can do about it. I wish this thing would have been a little better. I should have chosen the more expensive projector, right? But hey, you know, you get what you pay for, right? So, but again, it said every European nation that colonized North America utilized Indian slaves. Everybody, all these crackers that came here, they enslaved the indigenous people, period. Right? For construction, plantations, and mining on the North American continent, but more frequently in their outposts in the Caribbean and in the metropoles of Europe, meaning they put them on ships. It is estimated that between 1650 and 1730, that's an 80-year period, at least 50,000, and likely more due to transactions hidden to avoid paying government tariffs and taxes. 50,000 were exported by the English alone to their Caribbean outposts. Between 1617 and 1717, listen to this now, between 1670 and 1717, far more Indians were exported than Africans imported. Huh? So what does that let you know? That in the early stages of the Americas and developing it and building up for what it was, more Native Americans were being enslaved than black. Eventually it evened out over the centuries, especially as the decimation of the indigenous populations continued to happen. We're talking about the death of, again, 77 million, right? But this happened. They were enslaved. Next slide. More photographs of white people taking Native Americans into slavery. As y'all can see, this ain't all that, but y'all can see the picture at least, right? So next slide. Salakia, where you at?
That's right.
Okay. Okay, the Indian slave trade covered an area from as far west and south as New Mexico, then Spanish territory, northward to the Great Lakes, that's up in your Midwest, Illinois, Minnesota, etc. Historians believe that all tribes, listen to this, historians believe that all tribes in this vast swath of land were caught up in the slave trade. So there was natives from every tribe that you know about and heard about in America were taken into slavery. From every tribe. As early as 1636, after the Pequot War, if y'all remember yesterday's lecture, we talked about the Pequot, in which 300 Pequots were massacred. Those who remained were sold into slavery and sent to Bermuda. Major slaving ports included Boston, Salem, Mobile, and New Orleans. From those ports, Indians were shipped to Barbados by the English, Martinique and Guadeloupe by the French, and the Antilles by the Dutch. Indian slaves were also sent to the Bahamas as the breaking grounds where they might have been transported back to New York or Antigua. Right? So we are clearly seeing vast documentation about the North American Indian being put into slavery. Vast documentation. Right? Keep going. Now it says, the state of Virginia declared that Indians, mulattoes, that's for the mulatto haters, Indians, mulattoes, and Negroes to be real estate. Again, the state of Virginia declared that Indians, mulattoes, and Negroes are to be real estate property. Right? So take your colorism, take your hatred toward the indigenous people, take all that off the table, and vice versa toward the dark-skinned brothers. Take all that off the table because all of us was called cattle. This is in your government's law books that we were all considered real estate collectively. And in 1682, New York forbade African or Native American slaves from leaving their master's home or plantation without permission. That's a book called Black Indians, A Hidden Heritage. Right? So this was all collective. We was all in this together. That's what we got to understand. And we still in this together right now. That's the point of this. What is some fool going to say? Oh, well, the Native Americans, that's what they're going to say. Well, the Native Americans own slaves. That's interesting, right? I'm going to talk about this because I don't got it in the presentation. So I'm going to talk about it for a minute. Some fool may come along and say, the Native Americans had slaves. Okay, Negroes had slaves. I'm going to tell you this. There were not more Native American slave owners than there were free black slave owners. There were not, right? And of the over 900 federally recognized Native American tribes, 4 were slave owners. 4 of over 900. If that ain't an extreme minority, I don't know what is. More Irish people own slaves, which they always want to run with that, right? And more free black people own slaves than Native Americans own slaves. Remember that they had something called 5 civilized tribes, right? The Cherokee being the chief. All the 5 civilized tribes received slaves But the reason why only 4 owned slaves is because when the Seminole Indian received slaves, they refused to enslave the African Americans they received. They gave them spots in their tribe. They let them intermarry with their daughters. They gave them positions of power within their nation. This is historically documented. So only, again, 4 tribes owned slaves. Those would be the 4 civilized tribes. All the other 900, they refused, and they did not take black people into slavery. Right? And then if you bring that up, let's not take out of consideration that black men signed up to, on behalf of white people, to murder Indians in something called a Buffalo Soldier. So we've done wrong to each other, and the white man has been the nucleus in this entire situation. So we need to start pointing fingers at who's really to blame: the damn devil that stole their land and brought us over here. Right? That's just for anybody who want to bring up Native Americans owning slaves. And if you want to look at it from a biblical perspective, Joseph was sold by 10 of his brothers into slavery. If you want to look at it from a biblical perspective, in Jeremiah the 34th chapter, Israelites had Israelites in slavery. It wasn't right, but it's something that historically happened amongst Israel. If you want to go into the book of Kings, the northern and the southern kingdom were at war. The northern kingdom came and took 100,000 slaves out of the southern kingdom. This is all in the Bible, if you want to look at it from a biblical perspective. Huh? And the amount of Native Americans that owned slaves was less than all of those instances I just referenced. Right? Next slide. Now it says, many members of Native American tribes in the West will be taken against their will for life as slaves. This is just another witness proving a point. And this is via Stealing Indian Women, Native Slavery in the Illinois Country. Right? You can get that book. Right? Because we giving y'all the sources. We're not just coming out our ass here. We're giving you the sources. Multiple sources working cohesively through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai to paint the portrait. Next slide. This says, in the East, Native Americans were recorded as slaves. This would be a slavery in the Americas, American experience. Right? More sources for you. Next slide. All right. Salakia. So, we talked about the Native American brothers. Now what we're going to talk about is our brothers south of the border, right, who are also indigenous, right? Salakia, man. All my Spanish speakers, make sure I'm saying this right. Hold on. Okay. Encomienda, okay? Encomienda was a Spanish labor system. Encomiendas devolved from the original Iberian form into a form of communal slavery, okay? In the encomienda, the Spanish crown granted a person a specific number of natives from a specific community, but did not dictate which individuals in the community would have to provide their labor, right? So essentially, the Spaniard white man said, listen, I'm going to take one Spaniard, I'm going to point him over this entire village of indigenous people, and he'll figure out who he wants to work for him and what work he wants them to do, where it would be more productive for him to basically gain from it. That's what encomienda was, right? So we're going to keep reading this. Indigenous leaders were charged with mobilizing the assessed tribute and labor. In turn, encomienderos were to ensure that the encomienda natives were given instruction in the Christian faith in Spanish language via a book called Early Latin America. So they would instruct them in the Christian faith in Spanish language. Interesting. Next slide. Right? In other words, someone comes into your existing tribal community and forces you to work for them. The same people force you to be indoctrinated into their religion, which leads you to forsake your own. These same people also force you to learn their language, right? That's what encomienda is, right? Next slide. So let's just isolate this. Someone comes into your existing tribal community and forces you to work for them. Next slide. Whoa, interesting. Deuteronomy 28, 43 and 33. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low, right? A stranger came in, subjugated your existing tribal community, and made you work for them. He got up above you very high, and you came down very low. The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed always. Reiterating that, right? So the fruit of that land now is going to a stranger that stepped up in there, and he's reaping the benefits of it. He's up above, high above you, and you're down low. But you're telling me these people don't fit the curses? Are you a fool? Next slide. The other bullet point, the same people force you to be indoctrinated into their religion, which leads you to forsake your own. Next slide. Jeremiah 17:4. And thou even thyself shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee. See that? Thine heritage. They discontinue from their heritage, and I will cause thee to serve thy enemies in the land which thou knowest not. Here's the interesting part. Somebody gonna say, well, they knew the land. They've been in that land. Well, at the time that this prophecy was decreed, they didn't know that land because their land was Israel, and this is the place they came to after this prophecy came out. That was a land they did not know. That's not the land they're originally from, but they went there 2,700 damn years ago, so they've been here a while, so they learned that land. But at that time, this was a land that they didn't know, nor did we know, as the southern kingdom. And I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not, for ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. Next slide. Right? Next point. These same people also force you to learn their language. This is what encomienda is about. Next slide. Deuteronomy 28:49. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose language thou shalt not understand. See that? That new language that you didn't know, now they're instructing and indoctrinating you into it. All according to the Bible prophecy, right? Next slide. All right. Now, this will be the Encyclopedia of Slave Resistance and Rebellion. In many cases, natives were forced to do hard labor and subjected to extreme punishment and death if they resisted. Right here, it's telling you. Same thing that the Negro went through is the same thing the indigenous went through, right? The same thing that the natives, right? Next slide. The man we're looking at here got a name of Juan Cabrillo. This statue of Juan Cabrillo is at what's called Cabrillo's Point in San Diego, California. He is regarded as the founder of San Diego. He's being celebrated this year, which is I believe the bicentennial celebration of the city of San Diego. He's being celebrated multiple times. Juan Cabrillo. Okay? They argue about what country he comes from, either Spain or Portugal. One of the two. All right, so he's a white man, a devil, no less. But this is Juan Cabrillo. He got a statue. He's immortalized again. He's getting celebrated multiple times this year. He's regarded highly in the history of the Americas as a pioneer, right? Interesting, right? So let's read about Juan Cabrillo. Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo benefited from the encomienda system that enslaved the native people of the Americas. In Honduras, for example, he broke up families, setting them in to mine for gold and the forest to harvest materials he needed for shipbuilding. This is via the book named after him, Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo. Y'all can check that book out. So it says clearly this man who's immortalized, who is known as the founder of the city of San Diego, how did he get his claim to fame? How did he get his riches? Through taking the natives of Honduras and sending them to mine gold for him and get materials so he can build ships, force them into slavery under the system of encomienda, right? Because encomienda would appoint a white man to go amongst an existing tribal community and control them and force them to do jobs on his behalf where he reaps all the labor of it while he teaches those people to be good Catholics and speak Spanish. See, that's how it works. So that's what he did in Honduras, he did it in Mexico, and he did it in the state of California, right? Next slide. So now we're going to go into another form of slavery that existed amongst our native brothers. Okay, make sure I say this right. Make sure I say this right, Salakia. Yeah, okay. The Guinezalos, okay? The Guinezalos, okay? The Guinezalos were Native American slaves who had been kidnapped at a young age and sold into New Mexico during the 18th and 19th centuries. They served their masters as domestic servants, sheep herders, laborers, and in a variety of other capacities. Okay? So this is a view of the acculturation and assimilation in colonial New Mexico. So again, let me not say this wrong, Salakia. The Guenezados were Native American slaves who had been kidnapped at a young age, sold into New Mexico during the 18th and 19th centuries. They served their masters as domestic servants, sheep herders, laborers, and in a variety of other capacities. Slavery, right? Okay, let's hear more about the Guenezados. Next slide. Right, here's a picture of the Guenezados with their white masters. These are the white boys that own all the dark Latino people that you see, or the indigenous people that you see circling them, right? Those are the devils. These slaves are called Guenezados, right? Showing you that they clearly fit the curses. They're clearly our people. Next slide. It says most Guenezados were, or their ancestors had been slaves captured by the Spanish from Indian tribes or purchased from Indian tribes, especially from Plains Indians, right? Next slide. We're going to look at another form of slavery that occurred in South America, all right? Now, I didn't have no Portuguese speaker handy, so you're going to have to bear with me on how to say these niggas' names, these devils' names, right? The Banderiantes. Okay, the Banderiantes. Next slide. The Banderiantes were 17th century Portuguese settlers in Brazil and fortune hunters, right? They had expeditions called banderias, which in Portuguese means flag, right? Essentially, their name really denotes that they would go places on behalf of the country in the Kingdom of Portugal and plant the flag of Portugal in places that belong to native people. That's why they got that name. Meaning we just come and we plant that Portuguese flag there and claim this as Portuguese land, right? Which penetrated the interior of Brazil, far west, I gotta read this word. Which penetrated the interior of Brazil, far west of Tordesillas, the Tordesillas line of 1494, which officially divided the Castilian, later Spanish West domain from the Portuguese East domain in South America, right? Because what did the white men do? They came to the Americas and they split that mug in half. Spanish over here, Portuguese over here, French over here, Dutch over here, English over here, etc., right? The main focus of the Banderiantes, earlier missions, what was the main focus of the earlier missions? To enslave native populations. Again, this is prior to the importation of the African American, right? A banderia tactic was to set native tribes against each other in order to weaken them, then to enslave both of them, right? So again, what was their tactic? What was their tactic? Was to set native tribes against each other, right? So like, what's this damn line? I don't know why I can't see that line. The bottom line right here from N.
In order to weaken them.
In order to weaken them, right? So again, to set native tribes against each other in order to weaken them and enslave both sides. That's what the white man does to us now. They do it within each tribe, and they pin not only the tribe against itself, then they pin tribes against each other, then they pin kingdoms against each other, all to wit to enslave both sides. It's the devil's tactic of divide and conquer. We're not new to this, we understand this. But then we still allow it to seep into our brains and dictate our moves sometimes, and it's retarded. This is their game, divide and conquer. Again, a banderia tactic was to set native tribes against each other in order to weaken them and then enslave both sides. These white boys was able to go in there. I read about sometime they was able to go in there and enslave 60,000 natives. You kidding me? But they were able to do it because they had help of other natives because they pinned them against one another. Right? But that goes into us having an evil eye towards our brother. right? More of the curses. Next slide. Let's see what this say, right? No nigger, no Mexican. Can you get a load of this, y'all? I hope they can see the way these crackers spelled this, right? Y'all see this? I'm gonna make sure y'all see this. Look at this idiot. No niggers, Mexican, Puerto Rican. It's Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, right? It says Puerto Rican. Porto, right? Or dogs allowed. They equated us as an animal. These devils. No niggers, Mexican, Puerto Rican, or dogs allowed, right? Because remember the title of the lecture, they were also segregated, right? Next slide. Another one, it said this park was given to white people only. Mexicans and Negroes stay out. Again, this park was given to white people only. Mexicans and Negroes stay out. Order of Park Board. Here we have a collective oppression, a collective segregation. Next slide. We serve whites only. No Spanish or Mexican. Letting you know I ain't talking about a Spaniard, talking about a Latino in general. Spanish speaker. None of y'all allowed. Whites only. Right? This a good old white only establishment, right? Showing you they went through the same things that we did. Next slide. No dogs, Negroes, Mexicans. Lone Star Restaurant, Dallas, Texas. Good old Dallas, Texas. No Negroes, Mexicans, or dogs allowed. Y'all see that? A picture worth 1,000 words sometimes, man. So you can see that there was a collective segregation. You didn't see that in Mississippi and Alabama, Florida, things like that. You know why you didn't see that? It's because a Mexican wasn't down there, right? Wasn't no Latinos in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi in this time period. So you only saw no Negro down there. Black only, white, or even colored. Because guess what colored means? Who are people of color? Not just Negro, that'd be the Mexican too, the Latino, Native American as well. So that they would be a part of that exclusion, right? But in places where there was large populations of Latinos and in particular Mexicans, we saw this, right? Next slide. So this is something called Juan Crow, right? Y'all know about Jim Crow. A lot don't know about something called Juan Crow, right? In 1946, 5 Mexican-American fathers, and their names of brothers, challenged the practice of Mexican school segregation in the United States District Court for the Central District of California in Los Angeles. They claimed that their children, along with 5,000 other descendants of Mexican ancestry, right, were victims of unconstitutional discrimination by being forced to attend separate schools for Mexicans in Westminster, Garden Grove, Santa Ana, and El Medina school districts for Orange County. So here we can see, just like the schools in the South were being segregated and Negroes couldn't go there, we're seeing in Southern California, Mexicans can't come to school with the white boy. That's called Juan Crow. You heard of Jim Crow? That's called Juan Crow. And this is just the chief example of Juan Crow. There are other laws that are considered Juan Crow laws that are considered predatory and especially aimed at Mexican populations, be them legal or immigrant status. Right? We see the similarity. We all went through the same thing, man. The Spirit bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of God, man. Right? Next slide. Y'all see that? Y'all see the strange fruit? It's strange fruit on this tree. But this ain't in the South. This in good old California. And these ain't Judites. These are all, everybody you see on this tree is a Mexican. Y'all thought only Negroes got lynched and hung. What you're going to find out is the Mexican man was lynched and hung as well. Right? Matter of fact, Salaki, just real quick one. Right? I know I forgot to put this slide up, but it's on me now. I'm going to show y'all something about the first the first lynching in the Americas. I gotta show it to you. So this is our sister, Anna Kaona, right? Anna Kaona, okay? She was a princess of the indigenous Taino to the island of Hispaniola on the Haiti side, right? But this before Haitians came there, so she would be today known as a so-called Dominican. But the side of the island where she lived at was the Haiti side, right? And this is a depiction of her. I'm gonna try to blow this up as much as I can. It's gonna lose some quality, but this is a painting of her being hung. She's the first person to ever be hung in the Americas. Before a Negro was even over here. And this don't downplay the Negro, because we all went through hell. What it's showing you that we all blacks and Latinos, we all went through this together, hell together, man. We went through a hell together, man, a very special hell. And the white man is the devil, and he will pay. And we are the Hebrew Israelites. We are God's chosen people, right? So that's a lot. I ain't had this since I was supposed to put this in. I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. I want to read about this sister, right? Our sister from the tribe of Simeon. Okay, she was a Taino chief, born of what is now Lilgain, Haiti, right? Into a family of chiefs. The sister of Bohichio, chief of the Jaguar, okay? Her husband was Kaonabu, chief of the nearby territory of Maguana, right? Her brother and her husband were two of the 5 highest, I forget how to say this word, but it's like the cacique, yeah. Of the 5 highest caciques who ruled in the island of Quisqueya, which is now called Hispaniola, or where you have Haiti and Dominican Republic today, when the Spanish colonized it in 1492. She was celebrated as a composer of ballads, narratives, and narrative poems, right? So we're gonna go to a little bit about the system, right? Okay, boom. So like here. Okay. During Christopher Columbus's visit in 1496, Anna Kaona and Bohichio appeared as equal negotiators, right? So her and her brother went to negotiate with this devil, right? On that occasion, described by Bartolomé de las Casas, right, Spaniel, in his book Historia de las Indias, Columbus successfully negotiated for tribute of food and cotton to be paid by the natives to the Spanish under his command, right? So they got food and cotton out of these people, right? The visit is described as taking place in a friendly atmosphere. Several months later, Columbus arrived with a caravel to collect a part of the tribute. Anna Kaona and Bohichio had sailed briefly abroad the caravel nearby today's Leogain in the Gulf of Gonave as his guest, right? This is all in Haiti. At first, relations between natives and conquistadors were cordial, souring only later when Columbus was away in Spain. Of course, true colors came out, then the relationships began to sour, right? So it says Anna Kaona's rather high status was probably strengthened by elements of matrilineal descent in the Taino society, right? Now watch this. Anna Kaona became the chief of the Jauga after her brother's death. How did her brother die? By the hand of the Spaniards. Her husband, Caonabo, suspected of having organized a recent attack on La Navidad, a Spanish settlement on the northwestern Hispaniola, was captured by Alonso de Ojeda and shipped to Spain, dying in shipwreck during the journey. So her brother and her husband, who were the two chief leaders of all the Tainos in what is now known as Hispaniola, are dead. So she's left as the person in charge, right? As many Taino leaders died on ships away from their late native lands. Interesting. The Tainos, being brutalized by the conquerors, revolted and made a long war against them. So the Simeonites weren't going out without a fight. In 1503, during a meeting of 80 caciques, including Anacaona, the Spanish governor, Nicolas de Ovanda, ordered the meeting house to be set on fire to burn them alive. So he ordered that they all be burned alive, right? But she and her Taino noblemen were arrested, all accused of conspiracy for resisting occupation and executed. Prior to her execution, Anacaona was offered clemency, right? Real quick, get off the, click on one of her other pictures, man. I don't want to just show this at the, right? This mighty and valiant and majestic sister here, right? So watch this. This is a real sister, man, all right? Watch this. Prior to her execution, Anacaona was offered clemency, right? They were going to let her walk. They were going to let her off, right? Under one condition. What you think that condition was, officer?
To have sex with
If she would give herself as a concubine to one of the Spaniards. They said, listen, she's so damn fine. I mean, you see the Dominican woman fine as hell now, right? You see the, who am I thinking about? Amara La Negra, your Cardi B's, things like that, all right? Fine looking Dominican women, right? There's a few other Dominican women I'm forgetting right now. All of them fine as hell, right? So the Spaniard naturally wanted her. So again, prior to her execution, Anacaona was offered clemency if she would give herself as a concubine of one of the Spaniards, which was common in the era. Standing with her fellow Tainos in solidarity, the Caribbean indigenous female leader chose execution over colluding with her Spanish enemy. Right? So now you can go. So she was reigning. We'll go back to that. She was executed. First lynching here in America. Her refusal, cementing her legend, Anacaona remained rebellious and independent until her violent public death. Because Anacaona refused the sexual offer of the Spanish intruders, while others were shot, Anacaona was executed by hanging. So they shot everyone else, but to make an example of her, because she didn't jump on a Spaniard, they hung her, and she was the first hanging in all of the Americas. So when you try to downplay what our indigenous brothers and sisters have went through, what you have to understand is before you got put on a boat and brought here, they was already getting shipped to Europe. Before you got put on before you were strange fruit, they were strange fruit. So we all done went through all of this together, man. And we ain't gonna get out unless we come together by Hashem Mashiach Yahushua. It's an impossibility, right? Back to the keynote, Baruch Hashem. Right? Oh, you press play. Up here, you see that play? Boom. There we go. So here we see the SICARRI strange fruit. Right? Next slide. More white men down here. That's a Mexican brother. You've been seen a million times like this with a black man up there. He's the Mexican brother right there. Next slide. Right? It says Americans are largely unaware that Mexicans were frequently the targets of lynch mobs. From the mid-19th century until well into the 20th century, well into the 1900s. Second only to African Americans in the scale and scope of crimes. Right? So right after the black man, the Mexican man was hung just as much. One case largely overlooked or ignored by American journalists, but not by the Mexican government, was that of 7 Mexican shepherds hanged by white vigilantes near Corpus Christi, Texas. In late November 1873, the mob was probably trying to intimidate the shepherd's employer into selling his land. None of the killers were arrested. And this is, we're going to go into a few excerpts from this source. It's called Forgotten Dead, Mob Violence Against Mexicans in the United States from 1843 to 1925. great article written. So we're going to go through a few excerpts from that through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. So as we can see here, Americans largely are unaware that Mexicans were frequently the targets of lynch mobs. Right? You see a Mexican working in a taqueria, you think he owns it and he's thriving. Number one, 9 times out of 10, he don't own it. And you don't understand his people were enslaved and his people were lynched and segregated against the same as yours. You forget that, or you don't know that. But as you open the book, again, this information, a lot of people are unaware of it, but it's not hard to find. It's not hard to find. It's documented, primary sources, all of it exists. Next slide. From 1848 to 1928, mobs murdered thousands of Mexicans. These lynchings occurred not only in the southwestern states of Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas, but also in states far from the border, like Nebraska and Wyoming. Some of these cases did appear in press accounts when reporters depicted them as violent public spectacles, as they did with many lynchings of African Americans in the South. For example, on July 5th, 1851, a mob of 2,000 in Downeyville, California, watched the extra-legal hanging of a Mexican woman named Juana Loaiza. 2,000 white people gathered around and watched one Mexican woman get hung. But we're arguing about who the devil is. Next slide. Such episodes were not isolated to the turbulent gold rush period. More than half a century later, on November 3rd, 1910, a mob snatched a 20-year-old Mexican laborer, Antonio Rodriguez, from a jail in Rock Springs, Texas. The authorities had arrested him on charges that he had killed a rancher's wife. Mob leaders bound him to a mesquite tree, doused him with kerosene, and burned him alive. The El Paso Herald reported that thousands turned out to witness this event. We found no evidence that anyone was ever arrested. So we know black men got doused and burned like that. We know black men and black women got hung like that. Now we have the documentation showing that our Mexican brothers went through the same exact thing. All praise Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. Not that any of this happened, but all praise that he's giving us this information to help identify ourselves, and all praises, most importantly, that I know he's going to avenge every single one of these deaths. That every single one of these crackers in particular is going to pay. We know that. They're going to pay because they're going to have to be slaves to these same Mexicans who they murdered. And that's a beautiful thing, and we thank Yahweh, B'Shem Mashiach Yahushua, for that undeniable truth. Next slide. Between 1915 and 1918, vigilantes, local law officers, and Texas Rangers executed without due process unknown thousands of Mexicans for their alleged role in a revolutionary uprising known as Plan de San Diego. Here's what's interesting, right? Y'all remember a few months ago it was Texas Independence Day, and we went into the history of how Texas even got its independence. So if we notice, we have the white Texas Ranger is going and murdering the Mexicans for planning a revolution, an alleged revolution, against the white Mexican in America. But the white man could go into Mexico as an illegal immigrant and stick his flag in it and claim it for his own, which is how the white man even got Texas. But if the Mexican man plans a revolution to get their stolen property back, they got to be lynched and murdered. Ain't that something? Right? White fears of Mexican revolutionary violence exploded in July and August 1915 after Mexican raiders committed a series of assaults on the economic infrastructure of the lower Rio Grande Valley in resistance to white dominance. They wanted their stuff back. The raids unleashed a bloody wave of retaliatory action amid a climate of intense paranoia. So the white man was paranoid. He was going to lose what he stole, as usual. So he began to murder, because that's what he knows how to do. Right now, he's shooting you down. Right now, he's coming down on you. It says, Satan have a great wrath, knowing that he have but a short time. Why is that? Because he feels himself losing power. The white man, as the parasite that he is, lives in a constant state of paranoia that somebody's going to take what he has fought and clawed so hard to steal. What he's lied so much to have, what he's murdered so much to have, what he's raped so much to have. He don't want to let that go. And he'll stop at nothing to keep hold of what he stole. Because he don't want to crawl back in them caves, man. He knows if he don't do this, it's back to the caves he goes. And he afraid of that. Next slide. Hope y'all can see this, man. Hold on. Make sure y'all see this. We got the Texas Rangers here. Y'all see they're on horses. Right? Good old Texas Rangers, right? Now watch this. Y'all see what's on the floor? Hope y'all can make that out what's on the ground right there. Let me try that. Y'all see what's on the ground? Them are 3 Mexican brothers. Lynched, tied by the neck, and lynched to these horses. Y'all about to see me outside Burger throw out whoever get a super chat, right? You see that? They're on the ground, and they lynched them by just tying the ropes around their neck and tying them to these horses and riding around with them. Because the white man is the devil. Next slide. We'll go into some race riots, right? We know infamous riots, Black Wall Street, the Watts riots, 92 riots, Rodney King riots. The Latino and Native also went through some riots. I'm going to just name a few. This is just a few of them. The Division Street riot in Chicago, the Zoo riot in LA, the Wynwood riot in Miami, the Lawrence riot in Lawrence, Massachusetts, the Moody Park riot in Houston, Texas, and the Great Brook Valley Projects riot in Worcester, Massachusetts. Right? Next slide. I'm going to go into a couple of the riots, just touch on them. Namely, the Division Street riot and the Zoo riot, right? So this is about the Division Street riot, which took place in Chicago. It's via a book called Puerto Rican Chicago, right? So all praises, and it reads, some of the new Puerto Rican arrivals settled in Chicago's north side, specifically in Lincoln Park. But by the late 1960s, gentrification took hold in Lincoln Park, and working class Puerto Ricans were displaced by high property tax, expensive housing around the city. Some Puerto Ricans face housing discrimination based on their skin color and ethnicity. Many moved west, settling near Division Street in Westtown, Bucktown, and Wicker Park. The Chicago Catholic Church, y'all gotta listen to this. The Chicago Catholic Church did not offer the Puerto Rican community their own parish. Wait a damn minute. You mean to tell me you sailed on my island from Spain, you robbed my island of its resources, you forced me to speak your language of Spanish, you forced me to worship Caesar Borgia and become a Catholic, but then when I want to come in your Catholic church, you won't sanction me to have my own Catholic church, right? I can't have my own Catholic church, but then watch this. It gets worse. The Puerto Rican couldn't have their own Catholic church, but then watch. So devout Puerto Ricans had to try to attend existing parishes. You wouldn't give me my own church, so okay, I'm gonna try to go to existing Catholic churches, right? In the 1950s and 60s, some white parishes did not accept Puerto Rican parishioners. So you won't let me get my own church, but then I can't go up in the damn white church, and this is all to worship Caesar Borgia that you forced me to worship. You got to point out?
Yeah, it's like, and that should really make our people mad and upset, because like the brother was bringing out, you go to my damn land, rape my damn country of all of its resources, and then enslave my people. Then I gotta go worship. You force me to go worship this image. Then I can't go worship this image. So then I try to go to another place to worship this image, but now I can't even worship that image. That's crazy.
All of this for Caesar Borgia.
They should. How do you not look at that? Wait a minute. I mean, they should wake. You gotta wake the hell up, man.
Yeah. First off, how am I gonna worship this white boy on this cross, and the white boy don't even want me to sit next to him in the church?
Right.
Maybe this ain't the way to go. That's what should have been dawning on the tribe of Ephraim in this time. But we know Ephraim is given to idols, right? So now, let's keep going. Where we at?
It says, so.
Oh, so Puerto Ricans were displaced, looking for a place to worship and meet. According to Felix Padilla, the systemic oppression that Puerto Ricans experienced in Chicago in the 1960s created a psychological climate for riot, right? All the makings psychologically were there the same way in the 60s, and West that riot erupted, and in Detroit and all these other places these riots erupted because the psychological climate was created. All the harsh oppression that the white man mercilessly put upon us, we just were going to explode. Puerto Ricans faced racial discrimination, class-related hardships, and lived on the margins of a city that only valued them for their cheap labor. Again, that's via Puerto Rico, Chicago. Next slide. In 1966, Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley declared the first week of June to be Puerto Rican Week, right? This is around the time you had the Negro Week, then you had the Puerto Rican Week, right? On June 12, 1966, Puerto Ricans celebrated the culmination of this week and their first ethnic parade in downtown Chicago, held on June 11th. In the evening on Division Street in Westtown and Humboldt Park, an altercation began between police and revelers near Damon Avenue and Division Street. Police alleged that Arcelis Cruz, a young Puerto Rican man, was armed and involved in a street fight. A white police officer, Thomas Munyon, shot Cruz in the leg. So he had a little fade. He might have had a little joint on him. White boy just hop out, shoot him, just like now. Just like now, right? No different. Shot the brother. He shot him in the leg. A large crowd gathered and bystanders became involved. Some gathered to try to help Cruz. Others to demonstrate against police violence. More police were called with canine units. So they want to sick the dog on the Puerto Rico. You ain't sick enough dogs on them in Puerto Rico? Everybody know about the infamous tales of the dogs that got sicked on the brothers in Puerto Rico. You ain't do that enough? They called the white man called the dog on the tribe of Ephraim. Right? A police officer let a dog bite a Puerto Rican man on the leg. The crowd of over 4,000 Puerto Ricans attacked the police with rocks, bottles, and cans and smashed windows of police cars. The crowd overturned some police cars and set fire to others. More police and canine units were called in, but the rioting continued for 3 days. So this is a little bit on the Division Street riot, letting you know the same type of things that were happening in Black America, they were happening in Latin America as well. Meaning among the Latino and indigenous peoples of the United States of America. Right? Somebody just asked me, why aren't Australian Aboriginals, they look. Don't ask me about the way nobody looks. You already began on a false premise. Pal, or the Australian. Listen, man. If you think the Australians are Israelites, go and teach the Aboriginal Australia. Okay? But I hope you know half of them is creamies. It's funny. They'll try to say, oh yeah, man, the white man came and raped the Mexican and they're Edomites. Guess what? A lot of those extremely dark-skinned Australians got white daddies and they dark-skinned. They're called creamies. A lot of y'all don't know the history of Australia. I've been knowing the history of Australia since middle school. All right? I've been knowing about the creamy since middle school. A lot of them dark mahogany, dark brown, and got a white daddy. A lot of them. Not like, oh, you're alleging and you think a Spaniard raped their grandmother 500 years ago. I'm talking about literally their father is white.
Right.
Their dad. They go home, there's a white guy there. A British, blonde hair, blue-eyed white boy. And he's dark-skinned. Because that Australian Aboriginal, he got he got a level of melanin, man, that can't be messed with, man. Okay? He put a Sudanese to shame. He called a Sudanese light skin. Right? That's how melanated the people of the Australoid people are. Okay? It's not about look. The Australoid, the Polynesian, the Micronesian, the Melanesian, the African, We all, the Latino, we all have the same phenotype. You should have listened to yesterday's lesson where we demonstrated that through the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. It's called the original or the normal phenotype of the planet Earth. We all got it. It ain't about look. Okay? So go ahead.
It says the crowd overturned. Oh,
I got it. It's like you all good, huh? You all good. Well, we had to say, okay, oh no, we read that part. So yeah, next, this is via, we read all that. Let me cite the sources via Brown in the Windy City, as well as Riot and Remembers, Puerto Rican, Chicago, and the Politics of Interruption, and also what happened in the Humboldt Park riot in 1966. Now I'm going to talk about another one of these race riots. It's called the Zoot Suit Riot. Y'all remember that song? Back in the 90s, they used to have a song, Zoot Suit Riot, right? The Zoot Suit Riots were a series of conflicts on June 3rd to 8th of 1943 in Los Angeles, California, United States, which pitted American servicemen stationed in Southern California against Mexican-American youths and other minorities who are residents of the city. Okay? This is via a book called The Power of the Zoot Suit, Youth Culture and Resistance During World War I. Or was that two? Say two? World War II, my fault. Right? Look, man, again, this, yeah, they get that idiot out of here.
none of that's gonna be fine.
That's a nigga that ain't listening to nothing. I don't listen, man. Any of you idiots that come in here, man, it's like the officer just said, it's zero tolerance, man. You idiots ain't listening and you have an agenda and your agenda is predicated upon stupidity and ignorance, man. It's not predicated upon the Bible. It's not predicated upon history. It's not predicated upon archaeology or science. It's predicated upon you're an idiot. And that's it. Nigga, I'm not up at 5 in the morning doing this lecture for one of you idiots to come in. I'm going to tell you that now. Like a nigga ain't up here tired, man. But this information that got to go out through the spirit of Bob Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. So guess what? We don't have we have a zero tolerance for an idiot at 5 a.m. What time is it out?
It's 4:59 right
It's 4:59 a.m., man. I don't have no time for you niggas, man. You know I ain't been to sleep.
Yeah.
Right? Officer Assad, this nigga ain't been to sleep. Huh? Next slide.
You want to be an idiot, that's fine. Just do it by yourself.
Just go on your own channel and do it.
Just don't infect us.
Don't affect us with your idiocracy, please. Especially not at this ungodly hour.
Right.
Lord in Christ. Next slide. American servicemen and white civilians. This is what happens, right? The regular white boy, he get with the army white boy. And what do? Attack and strip children, teenagers, and youths who wore zoot suits. So they were attacking all minors. I thought nothing could stop the U.S. Army. These good, strong U.S. Army. These niggas beating up kids with other grown-ass white people who wore zoot suit. That was the style back in that time. Now, you know, niggas dress how they dress. Back in that day, the cool thing was to wear the zoot suit, right? A style that the tribe Iscar, the Mexican man, was really proliferating in what they would call the Pachuco style, right? And a lot of Judites was following that style also. What does it say? Abstainably? What is that word? I can't see it. Right here.
Ostensibly?
Ostensibly, because they considered the outfits. Here's why. Now listen. They considered the outfits which were made from a lot of fabric to be unpatriotic. So these grown white men attacked Mexican minors because they felt like what they were wearing wasn't patriotic. What a motivation to attack an underage person or any damn body for that matter. I don't like what you got on, so I'm going to attack you. No, what it comes from is the innate jealousy that is documented in the Bible in Genesis 27 about Esau. It say that he was jealous. He hated Jacob because of his blessing. He's envious and he's jealous of the descendants of Jacob because of how God has blessed us. And they was looking so fly in that style, in that zoot suit, and the white man just burned inside. So we called it unpatriotic. A lot of fabric was used. It's got a high fabric count. You shouldn't be wearing that, right? And he attacked young Mexican, all under 18. Again, it says, and they ripped their clothes off, children, teenagers, and youths. Right? Rationing of fabric was required at the time for the war effort. The conflicts were rooted in racism against Mexicans and Mexican Americans. That's what it's about. It really was about we hate Mexicans. That was about a white man hates Mexicans. Right? Next slide. The Zoot riots were related to it because now they've looked back at the history of this and they've been able to take a look at the psychological motivation of the white man for doing this. It says the Zoot riots were related to fears. What is it all out of? Fear and hostilities aroused by the coverage of the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial following the killing of a young Latino man in a barrio near Los Angeles. So the white man was already uppity because he just had knocked down a Mexican brother. He just murdered a Mexican brother and got away with it. And they felt like maybe the Mexicans were going to uprise over it. So the white man said, we just going to beat these niggas to the punch, right? This riot appeared to trigger similar attacks that year. So after this, more attacks were, white people started attacking more Mexicans against Latinos in Chicago, San Diego, Oakland, Evansville, Philadelphia, New York. So after that, more anti-Latino attacks and riots by white people happened across the nation again. Chicago, San Diego, Oakland, Evansville, Philly, and New York. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other cities that were directly connected to the Zoot riot as the inspiration. So this one riot really was 7 riots happened all across the country. Okay? And this is via a publication called Everything You Need to Know About Latino History. All right? All praises though. Next slide. Now we're going to get into the next section. This is Isaiah 42 and 22, and it reads, but this is a people robbed and spoiled. They are all of them snared in holes. They are hid in prison houses. They are for a prey, and none delivereth, for a spoil, and none saith restore. Key point we want to talk about, prison houses. We want to talk about mass incarceration. Next slide. It's via the NAACP, and it reads, though African Americans and Hispanics make up approximately 32% of the U.S. population that's combined, they comprise 56% of all incarcerated people. So we're less than a third of this country's residents, yet we are over half of this country's prisoners. All right? Let that sink in. If African Americans and Hispanics were incarcerated at the same rates as whites, prison and jail populations would decline by almost 40%. If they locked us up the same way they lock white people up, it would literally almost cut the prison population in half. Nigga, that's staggering. But it's showing you we up in them jails together, baby. We right up in there together. God damn it. We are in there. This is the raw numbers. Men lie, women lie. The numbers don't lie. And the Most High don't lie, of course. Right? So here we have it. If they locked us up the same rate they locked the white man up, could damn near cut that jail in half. The water for the super chat, y'all. Next slide. Again, y'all, going back to the initial scripture, Jeremiah 15:33. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Yahweh Tazabah. The children of Israel, the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captive held them fast. They refused to let them go. We right in them jails together, baby. Neck and neck. We up in them jails, man. Next slide. Okay, this is something called FIPS, right? FIPS is called Fatal Interactions with Police. Okay, FIPS. It's a research group, right? Which includes contributions from public health, biostatic experts at hospitals and universities, including St. Louis University, New York University, and Harvard University. NYU and Harvard University being two of the most prestigious institutions in this country. Harvard, of course, the most prestigious university in this country. NYU is amongst the top prestigious universities in this country, right? So all of these top scholars, all of these public health officials and biostatistic experts came together and created a research group called Fatal Interactions with Police, FIPS. So let's take a look at some of their findings. Next slide. Key findings from the first report include In neighborhoods with high levels of income inequality, such as poor areas undergoing gentrification, all males of color face a higher risk of being killed during interactions with police. Hispanic men face an even higher risk than black men in these settings. Y'all gotta swallow that. It said again, Hispanic men face an even higher risk than black men in these settings. Just because it's not getting put in the news, just because there's not a damn Facebook video of a Mexican getting murdered by police, the ratio of Hispanics that are murdered by police is higher than black. Not like black is far behind, but what you have to understand is we're going through this, man. And I'm doing this because a lot of Negroes want to discount what the Latino man is going through, not understanding they're going through the same thing you're going through. And in the instance of being killed by police, Hispanic men face an even higher risk than black men in these settings. It's right there, man. I'm not saying this. All these universities, all these health officials, they all came together, they all crunched the numbers, and this is their finding. Right? They're looking at all the instances where people are getting killed by cops, where it's happening, when it's happening, and who it's happening to. And it's pretty damn crystal clear. Next slide. More on the FIPS. This research project examines the factors that make males of color more likely than their white and female counterparts to be killed by police. Johnson said, the bottom line from this latest analysis is that the demographics of the neighborhood where you live, work, and walk the streets can make a big difference in the odds that a young black or Hispanic male will have a fatal interaction with law enforcement. Next slide. Zechariah 11:5, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. And they that seldom say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. As we can see, all the same things that the Southern Kingdom, so-called Negro, West Indian, and Haitian has fallen victim to are the same things that the Latino and Native American has fallen victim to. We are the same people. We have been oppressed together. We are the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? This has been part 2 of Viva Yasharahla. Again, Most High will, this will be a 6-part special lecture series. I hope y'all enjoyed. With that, I want to say the water to all that super chatted, like, sub, share, and super chat. Right? I want to definitely say the water and how about me out shot brought the thumb to all brothers and sisters who have super chatted. With that, we're gonna give all praises, all honor, and all glory unto the Abanawa Yahweh by Shalom Ashak Yahushai, and we're gonna say Shalom.
Shalom.